Okay, this is, well, first of all, hi everybody. This is a very weird experience for me, I have to say. I'm sat here in my office at home in a tiny little shed, imagining that I'm with you in Mexico, enjoying what's doubtless going to be sunshine and happiness and very, very happy people, whilst I'm shut away in this very sad little lonely place. So I'll try and make this presentation as entertaining as it would be if I were there, but you'll have to accept that context matters and it probably won't be as much fun. Now, see, I know that I don't need to preach to you all there because you're all sitting in a really lovely place talking about happiness, so I don't need to convince you. But I think we really are genuinely at a stage in the measurement of well-being where we can really have some significant impact on public policy. I've spent a long time around policymakers, many years around policymakers, and I just sense a real groundswell of interest as we're now showing something in these data. Notwithstanding some of the challenges that I shall come to talk about later. But as we're showing something meaningful coming through from these data, we have the ear of public policymakers. And I think now the time is perfectly right for us to think very seriously about incorporating measures, not just into ways to monitor and measure national happiness and national well-being, but to evaluate policy interventions. One of the things that we're increasingly doing in the UK is looking at the happiness hit of public policies. And I think that's a really exciting time. So it's very exciting that I have an opportunity to talk to you now, and it's very exciting, I think, as we move forwards in the next few months and years. It's just important, just for the outset, just to be absolutely clear about different accounts of individual well-being, all of which could potentially be used and have been used for public policy purposes. So, broadly speaking, we can distinguish between three different accounts. There's an account that's based on objective lists. This is essentially giving people more of the things that we think they need. And much of our healthcare system, education system, housing is based upon satisfying people's needs, the things that we think they ought to have. That account doesn't inquire into anything about how those public services and those interventions impact upon people's lives. They're just a judgment about the things that we think improve people's well-being. So that's a needs-based account. And as I say, much of public policy is based upon those needs. The second account is a preference satisfaction account. This is basically people's lives go better when they get more of the things that they want. And so this is an account that's very prominent in economics. It's why if you look at any basic economics textbook, it will say utility, which we can take to be well-being, is a function of income. And it's not that we think income is important in itself, but rather more income means, all else equal, you can satisfy more of your individual desires. You can buy more goods and services. And so that account of well-being has clearly become very important as a way to monitor and measure national income. We use GDP and other measures to measure the economic success of a nation. And then the third and final account is what's been called the mental state account. And this is the one that I'm going to focus on now. This is the account that says someone's life goes better, not when they get more of what they need, and not more when they get more of what they want, but when they get more of what they enjoy. More of things that make them feel better. And so this is the subjective wellbeing account, if you like. It's an inquiry into the impact that public policies and other interventions have on how people feel. And so this is an account that's become increasingly prominent over the last couple of decades, I think, as we now more confidently think we can measure people's happiness. Let's use that term. And as we're starting to show some associations between people's reports of happiness and things you might expect those reports to be associated with. So my own research interests are principally focused on precisely how we measure this thing called happiness. It's actually probably worth saying, as I've said that a few times, for the purposes of public policy though, the language might be more useful if we use the term suffering or if we use the term misery. Because when you go to policymakers and say public policy should promote happiness, some might look at you a little quizzically and think that's rather trivial. If you say to people instead, the purpose of public policy should be to reduce suffering, then you'd be rather sadistic not to think that's an important policy goal. So the measures that we might use might be the same in both instances, but the kind of presentation of the language matters. So whilst I'm going to continue to use the term happiness, I think for public policy purposes, we might alternatively wish to use the word suffering. So my own interests are in how we can capture the impact of interventions and experiences in life generally on how people feel. And I think the reason for that is that for me, ultimately the impact of anything that happens to us, be that a changed circumstance in our life, things that we choose to do, or what public policy does to us, the ultimate way in which we assess the impact of those things is on how they make us feel. Sure, needs matter, and sure, we want to care about people getting more of what they want, but I think those things are only instrumental value. They only have value in the consequences that they have for how people feel. So more healthcare, more education, more schooling, more housing, and more income are only important insofar as they make people feel better. That's the final consequence of anything that happens to us in our lives, and it should be the final consequence of anything that happens in terms of public policy. Or we should at least be trying to think of better ways to measure that final consequence. So that's effectively what my work seeks to do. And I'm particularly interested in how we measure happiness. There are lots of people interested in looking at the associations between happiness and other factors. I might say a little bit more about that towards the end, but my own interest particularly is in how we measure this thing called happiness. And in the report that we wrote for the Office for National Statistics, which led to them asking 4 questions that we recommended that they use to monitor national wellbeing in the UK, we broke the categorization of those happiness measures down into 3 types. There are evaluative questions, and these are the data that we have most observations on, essentially asking people global questions about how happy they are overall, or how satisfied they are with their lives overall. That's actually principally been the main question that's been used. When people have talked about the impact of income and all these things on people's happiness, they're typically thinking and talking to data about life satisfaction. And that's a general global question, sometimes answered on 0 to 7 scales, 1 to 7 scales. In all of our recommendations to the ONS, we suggested that all the measures should be on a 0 to 10 scale. 0 not at all to 10 completely. So that's the first category. The second category are what we might call more experiential based methods, but based measures. These are assessments of people's moods on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. So I might ask you how happy you're feeling, how anxious you're feeling, how angry you are, how stressed you are. And I'll ask you that over some relatively short time frame, be that now, the last hour, the last day perhaps. And in our recommendations to the ONS, we ask people to think about how happy and anxious they were yesterday. And then the third category is loosely called a eudaimonic sense of well-being. I say loosely called because eudaimonia has typically been associated with more objective measures of an individual's well-being rather than something that they report themselves. So it's a subjective assessment of eudaimonia. And what does that really mean? Well, it really means the degree to which people feel that what they do, the activities that they engage in, are meaningful, worthwhile, fulfilling, purposeful. We can use a range of adjectives there, and of course the obverse, pointless and futile. And so the 4 questions that the ONS now are asking are: overall, how satisfied are you with your life nowadays? That's the evaluative question. 2 experience-based questions about how happy you were yesterday and how anxious you felt. because of course it's possible to feel those two things together. And finally, how worthwhile are the activities that people engage in? So evaluation, experience, and eudaimonia. Now, it's worth saying that in my own reflections upon those questions since, and I talk about this a lot more in Happiness by Design, which is my book published by Alan Lane and Hudson Street Press in the US, I pay much more attention to experience-based measures, direct assessments of how people are feeling moment to moment. And I think that upon reflection, those those experience-based questions, and indeed the worthwhile question about activities, are evaluative questions. I mean, if you think about asking me how happy I was yesterday, well, actually, that's quite a difficult question to think about, to be honest, because I have to think about yesterday and what was I doing, who was I with, where was I going, how did I feel, and to aggregate that in a single number is quite a conceptually and cognitively hard challenge. But importantly, it requires me to reflect on how I felt and not to give direct insight into how I felt. So one of the things that we find in evaluative data, and we find this much less in actual direct experience data, is that there's a U-shaped relationship between happiness and age. That is, people get less happy as they get through to midlife. By the time they get through to their 50s, their happiness starts to rise again. And we see that in all life satisfaction data. And we see it in all four of the ONS questions. So it leads me to conclude that the ONS questions are all actually capturing evaluations of life rather than experiences directly. And I think that's a mistake. I think if I were writing those questions again now, I would pay much more attention to direct experiences. I would ask people how happy they've been feeling in the last hour or so, or how anxious they've been feeling in the last hour or so. And critically, I would also ask them, and I talk about this a lot in Happiness by Design, I would ask them directly how worthwhile or purposeful what they've been doing has been in the past hour or so. One of the things I think we've made a mistake in doing is asking too many questions of an evaluative and reflective kind, and not enough attention paid to the direct experiences, how people actually feel moment to moment, day to day. And let me tell you a story that's in the book that should give you, I think, hopefully some insight into that, what I think is an important difference. I went for dinner with one of our best friends, and she spent the whole of the evening complaining about her job, her commute, her boss, her colleagues. Everything about her day-to-day experiences of the job were pretty miserable. And then, without any hint of irony at the end of dinner, she said, "Of course I love working where I work." And I don't actually think that's such an irony. What she's doing is she's having experiences, moment to moment, day to day, that are telling her one thing about her happiness. And then she's telling a story about what she thinks should make her happy on the other hand. And because she worked for a prestigious company, it was somewhere that she'd always wanted to work, it was a great firm, how could she not be happy working there? And I think we spend too much of our lives and too much of our time trying to measure people's happiness by constructing stories. When you ask someone how satisfied they are with their life overall, it's a construction of an answer to a question that actually we don't routinely think about very much anyway. Whereas in contrast, what we do and how we feel is what we do and how we feel. As you go about your daily business, experiencing the pleasures and pains of daily life, that's where your real sense of happiness, your true experiences show up. And I think we should be paying much more attention to those experiences. And not just experiences of pleasure and pain, but critically experiences of purpose too. So all of that, there has been a lot of work done in trying to measure purpose, but it's all been done asking people these narratives, these stories questions. You might ask me, how much meaning do I think my life has? How much purpose does it have? How fulfilling is my life? And I'm going to, when I answer that question, I'm going to construct an answer based upon what's salient to me at the point at which I answer that question. So I might think about being a father, or I might think about my job, and I might say that my life is purposeful. But where the purpose in my life shows up is not in those grand statements, but in the experiences. So being a father, the where purpose shows up is not in the stories that I tell myself about how purposeful my life is, but in the experiences that I have as a father, helping my children tie their laces, reading them the times tables, listening to a story back to me for the 50th time. All these things that feel worthwhile, but feel worthwhile in the activities. And of course, actually, some of the things feel quite pointless too. So that's where I think we should be paying much more attention than we are at the moment to how we measure and capture happiness. Is to capture people's experiences of both pleasure and purpose over time. So that's where I have been focusing my own activities, and will continue to try to pursue that line of inquiry. And when you do that, as I alluded to before with the age example, you do get some interesting differences. So whilst it's universally shown that there's a midlife crisis basically in evaluative measures, the experience-based measures show, well, a rather mixed pattern. Some things get better, some things get worse with age, other things don't change. People get less stressful, for example, it seems, as they get older. In some data that we've looked at using the American Time Use Survey, this is actually quite a nice data set. It's about 13,000 citizens every year, or every couple of years, have been asked from 3 randomly chosen activities in the day to say how happy they were during them, but also to say how meaningful those activities are as well. So that's the closest that we've got data to getting at the idea of pleasure and purpose as experiences. And in those data, we find something quite interesting with age. We find that basically both pleasure and purpose are broadly flat with age, except in young adults. People up to about the age of 25 to 30 report significantly lower levels of purpose than those in older age groups. And I think that's particularly interesting in a whole host of ways, not least of which for policy purposes, of course, because if you want to engage young people in a whole range of activities, which could include pro-social behaviours, helping others, all these things that we know bring purpose, then you've got more of a challenge with that, arguably, if they are reporting lower levels of purpose to begin with. So I think that's a really interesting insight. And I think purpose is particularly interesting, I think, as an experience when it comes to workplaces and work life. I mean, who actually wants to go to work and do something that they find pointless or futile? So I think there's a lot of interventions that we could think about, both not just in public policy, but in the corporate sector too, that can improve people's sense of purpose as they experience their daily work lives. As I said, I think at the outset, one of the important linguistic issues is how you present happiness measures to policymakers. And I think an important part of that presentation is to use the negative side of the coin, if you like, the misery and suffering, because ultimately I think policy is about reducing the suffering of the people that suffer the most. So whilst we ask questions about how happy people are, if someone says they're 0 out of 10 or 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 or something, then you can be quietly confident that they're not doing very well. And arguably it's those people that we should be paying much more attention to in policy. And so I'm not just interested, in fact I'm not even interested in what the average numbers tell us, whether average happiness in the UK goes up from 7.2 to 7.4 or something, which I think is about what it's done in the last year or two. But I care much more about the distribution of happiness within those scores. How many people are now reporting 1 and 2 now versus last year? I think that's a much more important question for policy. So happiness measures allow us to address issues to do with those that suffer the most, those that have headaches, those that have stress and so on. So I think my conclusion from having spent some time going through the measurement issues is that you should be measuring evaluations of life satisfaction because that's what everyone does. And people are going to want some international comparisons of those data. Frankly, I find those international comparisons quite challenging sometimes, not least because what happiness means in one country doesn't translate very well into what it means into the next. But I understand fully that people like those data to be able to have a conversation. And it's as much about a conversation as it is anything else in those kinds of data. So I would recommend using that global life satisfaction data. But where I would differ and depart from what we recommended for the ONS is to measure experiences of happiness much more directly. I would ask people, and I think the questions we're just actually about to launch a couple of apps that sit alongside my book that help people monitor and monitor their own individual happiness. And the kinds of questions that we're asking there are basically how happy have you been feeling in the past hour or so, and how worthwhile has what you've been doing felt in the past hour or so. And I think that they're certainly questions that more directly tap into people's experiences. And for the reasons that I outlined before, I think they're much more useful in being able to identify just who's doing well and who's doing badly in life. Because people who are having lots of experiences that feel pointless and feel painful are the people that arguably we should be giving much more public priority to. That's where, for example, some of the challenges and problems associated with mental health will show up. And I think critically, it's important that we relate those data to time use. One of the nice things about experience-based data is that we can look at what people are doing as well as how they're feeling. And it's been remarkable to me in my own experience of spending, well, now more than 20 years advising governments, how few policymakers actually think about time use. Most policymakers, if you think about their challenges, will talk about big systemic and cultural changes. They'll talk about big ticket items like unemployment and income and housing and health. But actually, if you think about where you have the most discretion, although often it doesn't feel like that, it's at the margins with how you use your time. You can use your time slightly differently in ways that make you happier, that enable you to do things that make you happier and stop doing things that don't. And I think policymakers should be thinking much more about time use, about how they can design environments, nudge and sometimes shove people in ways that make it easier for them to use their time in ways that make them feel better, and harder for them to use their time in ways that make them feel worse. Because it's the scarcest resource of all. The whole time that I've been talking, sadly, you're probably all about half an hour closer to death than you were before I started talking, and I am too. And we're not going to get that time back. We can beg, borrow and steal money, but we can't get back time that's lost. And so we can't get back happiness that's lost. Lost happiness is lost forever. You can't transfer happiness around from one time period to the next in the same way as you can money. If you're miserable, you're miserable, and we should be thinking about policy interventions that can try and offset that. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it from me. I hope you started out with a happiness level that hasn't fallen by the time I've finished speaking. Of course, I don't have any way of finding out. I'm just sat here in my shed talking to myself. So that was interesting to me. I hope it was interesting to you. And I hope the rest of your conference is as interesting. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.
Presentation, and I'm sure it is going to be very worthy. The topic we are going to listen to by the presentations of experts. This is the kind of moments we expect when we attend to this kind of Congress, to tell us how, why, and how much. So we are going to listen to our experts who will address these issues. Is there an experience? Is there a recipe for well-being? And then they will tell us about cases of success that they have been involved with. So in brief, by the end, we might encounter that well-being has some other nouns that we can use to name it. So a couple of announcements. First I'm going to introduce to you our speakers. We know that video conferences are going to be tomorrow. So Now we are going to start with Charles Seaford presentation. He is a coordinator of a well-being center in the United Kingdom to promote new social progress and tendencies approaching new economic trends. He has several interviews, several things that have to do with well-being, human well-being, and priorities for economic policymakers. So Charles Seaford, please.
Buenas tardes. Forgive my Spanish. I don't speak any Spanish, so I shall have to give the presentation in English. It is, of course, a great honor to be invited to speak here. Not just in the way that it's always an honor to be invited to speak at conferences, but because, in addition, of the message that this conference is sending out very clearly about how important the state of Jalisco is taking this agenda. So it's great to be part of that. Thank you very much. I've been asked to speak on the question, is there a recipe for well-being? And to talk a little bit about experiences of public policies on well-being and whether they're, if you like, following the recipe. The answer is that there is a kind of recipe, although it's not yet fully written, and it certainly hasn't yet been compiled into a recipe book. There are lots of public policies on well-being in one way or another, but they're not always known as policies on well-being. There's a huge range of activity that's relevant to this agenda, and I'll try to give a little taste of the range, but it will be very much of an overview, so if anyone has any questions, obviously feel free to speak to me or email me. The agendas, the contact details are at the end. So what does a policy on well-being do? And I just want to begin by recapping what I mean by well-being. We're recapping because it's already been discussed quite a lot, but I want to sort of boil it down to a very simple idea. I mean, it was said yesterday by somebody that well-being should not be the property of experts. Everybody is an expert on their own well-being. It needs to be a very simple concept. And so we at the New Economics Foundation in London think of it as basically living a good life, living the life you want to lead, living well, and the good feelings that you have as a result of that. And that's basically what we mean. So, if that's what well-being is, what might policies on well-being be? Well, in order to live a good life, two things have to exist. You have to have the right external conditions. If you live a life of grinding poverty, or you live in a heavily polluted area, then it's unlikely that the right conditions exist for you to live a good life. You also have to have the right personal resources. If you're very unhealthy, if you're suffering from some chronic disease, or you have mental ill health problems, or you are deeply pessimistic about life, then it's unlikely that you'll be able to live a good life. So these two things, external conditions and personal resources, are, if you like, the foundations, the underpinning for well-being. And public policies and the various kind of programs and initiatives that fall under that heading, and some of which I'll describe, are basically designed to create the right external conditions and the right personal resources in order to allow people to live a good life. Bruno Frey this morning drew a distinction between the idea of working directly on well-being and the idea of addressing those problems which prevent people from enjoying well-being. So I suppose I'm really following the same distinction here and saying what I'm going to talk about are primarily about dealing with external conditions and personal resources. Next slide, and go on to the next one after that. Now, there's another question about what a recipe means, because I'm going to be a bit literal here, or rather I'm going to follow the metaphor a little bit, because I think it's quite a nice metaphor. A recipe typically has three elements: the ingredients, the proportions, and the method. Now, as far as the ingredients are concerned, we know these very well now. Bruno Frey, again, he mentioned 31 drivers of well-being, and other speakers have mentioned some of the critical drivers. John Hellebel yesterday identified 6 key drivers of well-being. So we know about that. There's a whole body of research. We don't need to spend a lot more time identifying them. The proportions is more tricky. Getting the right mixture of these different elements is always going to be difficult because there always will be trade-offs. Do I want a bit more this, a little bit more that? In different circumstances, the answer will be different. So that's going to be more difficult. And finally, the method, the actual assembly of these things into a policy and into delivery, that will always need a good chef. The method is always requires skill, political skill, policy development skill, and implementation skill. Nothing in the well-being agenda suggests that all these things are going to be in some way automated. So let's go on to the evidence for the ingredients. I'm not going to read these out, and I'm not suggesting that you plough through this. The point of this slide is just to remind us that the evidence is there, that the ingredients are quite well known. I got 28 rather than 31, which is what Bruno Frey this morning said, but there are probably many more as well that could be identified. Broadly speaking, though, they come under, in our view, come under these broad headings: material conditions, sort of money and the things you can buy with money, activity, how you spend your time, what you do, your health, your relationships, which has been emphasized a lot during this conference, the local environment, what it's like where you live, and society as a whole, broader aspects of society as a whole. And these are all vital ingredients of well-being. But it's easy enough to list them now that that research is done. The question remains, as I said, what are the proportions? Or rather, what matters most in any given circumstance? What are the trade-offs? What, crucially, can we influence? These might all be desirable, but can we actually, as policymakers, do anything about them? And what will the side effects be? For example, if we decide, for example, to raise the minimum wage in a country so that everyone has a decent income, will that have an impact on unemployment? And what impact? And is it worth doing so, even if it does have an impact? If we decide we want to create more jobs, could that damage the local environment? These are obviously the trade-offs that need to be considered, and the point is that the well-being approach gives us a tool, a much better tool than we've had in the past, to consider those kind of questions. Ideally, well-being economics, which is a discipline that is being constructed at the moment, as opposed to simply the well-being research about what these ingredients are. Ideally, well-being economics will give us the tool to answer these kind of questions. This little diagram here is from a report which was published earlier this year by a number of people, chaired by Gus O'Donnell, who was the head of the UK Civil Service. And basically, it's suggesting a new form of considering policy. The idea basically is that for any given policy, you consider its impacts on a whole range of different domains, a whole range of different drivers of well-being, or ingredients, if you like. And you consider what those impacts will be. At the same time, you also consider the relative importance of each of those impacts upon life satisfaction, which in this model is taken as the measure of well-being. So then you put those two together, and hey, presto, you have the impact of that policy upon life satisfaction. You can then decide whether policy A is better than policy B, or better than, indeed, worse than policy B, or indeed worse than taking no action at all. This is a new way of considering policy, not just taking into account the different ingredients of well-being, which is familiar enough, but actually integrating them into a single new form of analysis. It's not there yet. Work is going on to develop this. It's both about analytical tools, but also about the way that government is organized. Because if we think back about that list, we'll just go back a moment to the previous slide. If you think about that list, the people typically thinking about, say, education are not the same people who are thinking about, shall we say, health or the local environment. So it's quite difficult to get these things to be to work together, because it's not just about creating an analytical tool, it's about getting people to talk to each other who perhaps in the past haven't. So if we go on back to the next slide. This is not happening, certainly in the UK, or anywhere that I'm yet aware of. But it's going to happen, I think. There's definitely a will for this, for moving in this direction. Eventually, once you've got these tools in place, it will be possible to develop a coherent well-being program for government. And this will, because of this detailed analytical work, in effect be based on a new paradigm of the kind that was discussed yesterday, in which economic growth is not considered to be all and end all. It's simply one of many objectives that you might consider and balance. The problem is that until we get these analytical tools in place, it's very difficult to dislodge that paradigm. Now, that's all about the future, but I now want the rest of this to talk a bit about what we can do in the meantime, because nothing will happen if we rely upon perfection. We can't wait for these perfect new tools to be developed, for this new way of doing things, for this new paradigm to arrive. We need to start now. It's not that we need to start now, we need to continue to do what we're doing already and build on that. And I want to talk about 4 areas. It's not that these are the only 4 areas, but they're the 4 that I've sort of looked at, and they're different. And the point is that they are different, that there's a big range of different things that can be done to promote well-being. There are programs to influence behavior, specific programs which can influence behavior and thereby increase people's well-being. Typically, these will only affect a relatively small number of people compared to the population as a whole, but none the worse for that. It's often very powerful. There's public spending prioritization. If you've got a pot of money, should you spend it on this or that? Often this is just, in reality, this is down to who knows who, down to personal influence. I mean, in London, we're just we have been spending huge sum of money on a new art gallery, not because anyone thought this was good for anyone's well-being, but because the director of the art gallery was on very good terms with the Prime Minister, basically. Now, that's the way that these things happen. We all know that's the way the world works, but well-being analysis is a small counter to that. City planning is also, obviously, we've heard a bit about the importance of cities and how they can be planned to enhance well-being. And finally, and perhaps most important of all, economic policy, which is a big driver of well-being. So, first of all, just a couple of programs designed to influence people's behavior. The 5 ways to well-being. It was actually referenced in one of the previous presentations. The 5 ways to well-being was some work that, basically they are 5 kinds of action that people can take, kinds of behavior that people can take, which have been shown by the evidence to enhance people's well-being. They are connect, in other words, connect with other people, build your relationships, spend time with others, and even the people you don't know, try and connect with them. It might involve volunteering and joining clubs and what have you. Be active, in other words, take exercise. Take notice, which is an interesting idea but has a very strong impact on well-being. It's about being aware of what's going on around you. So rather than just thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I did yesterday, and just sort of slightly kind of, in a doze, just be aware of what's happening around you, that sort of alertness, and that has very strong, interestingly, very strong impact on well-being. Keep learning. We all have a natural curiosity. As children, it's very strong. Sometimes in adults, it weakens. If you can cultivate that and strengthen it, that is also shown to be good for well-being. And give, this has been referred to on several occasions. This includes things like volunteering, it includes giving money, but also it includes just giving yourself to situations. It's about just give it. The word is, I'm not quite sure. It doesn't really need much explanation. I think we all understand it. This is also a very strong driver of well-being. Now, these 5 behaviours can be promoted to people who suffer relatively low well-being, and they have been in the UK and also in Australia and New Zealand. It has a good impact. It's been shown to work quite well, but it it is obviously a program like that will only have a relatively small number of people targeted. I'm going to very, very quickly rush through this, but basically the UK lottery funds a whole set of projects designed to...
Can you speak louder, please?
Oh, is it not working properly?
Back because I'm here.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'll hold it closer. That's the thing, isn't it? So the... Yes, what was I saying? Yes, the UK lottery, which is, it makes a lot of profit out of people's buying the lottery tickets, and it uses the funds, some of the funds, to fund projects designed to change behaviour, increase well-being. And these have basically been shown to work quite well. We can move on. And the projects that tend to work best are the ones that involve building, and you can see incidentally, you will see the relationship with the 5 ways here, but this is arrived at separately, are ones that tend to involve people learning new skills, that involve volunteers who can give of their time, that are sociable, where people can connect with each other, that involve physical activity. Interestingly, the projects where participants co-design and co-deliver rather than having things done to them. Ones that are community-led. So you can see the tie-in with the the 5 ways to well-being. So I won't talk about this, just except to say that in the UK, the well-being analysis is being used to attempt to prioritise public spending within government departments rather than across government departments. So within the culture department, for example, different forms of subsidy can be analysed in terms of the well-being that is associated with the cultural activities that are being subsidised. So, for example, participative activities where people take part, as opposed to simply spectate, are shown to have particularly high well-being impacts and can be prioritised as a result. City planning, again, I won't go through this, but obviously many of these ingredients, the ones I've highlighted in red, can be influenced by the way that cities are planned. So, if you go on to the next one, there are plenty of go on to the next slide. There are plenty of examples around the world of how city planning has been quite successful in delivering some of these. Housing, the use of planning to ensure affordable housing does work in some places and doesn't work in other places. Commute times, difficult to influence commute times, but they have been influenced, I believe, in Seattle and other places. Physical activity can be influenced by how dense the population, the housing is, and what transport policy is adopted. Levels of social activity, as has been referred to earlier, can be influenced by the design of public space and the design of the transport system. And green spaces, too, can be planned in, even in dense areas. So the point here is not to give you a whole lecture on city planning, just to point out that city planning can be done in a way that enhances well-being or not, as the case may be. It's a key battleground, if you like, for well-being. And we are, in the UK, we're trying to push the planning system so that it is more concerned with well-being than simply generating a prosperous economy. What's the next one? Economic policy is the big prize. Obviously, many of these ingredients are influenced by economic policy, from decent income, and many of them have been referred to by other speakers. So if you go on to the next slide, the traditional approach, as has been referred to several times, is about growth in efficient markets. And that's basically what drives well-being in the traditional economic approach. Go on to the next slide. Clearly, other factors matter. They matter everywhere. They matter in Latin America. This is just another of these graphs. You've seen a few of these already, mapping life satisfaction and well-being. That one was just about Latin America. So what we have to do is take into account a broader range of ingredients which have already been listed. If you go on to the next slide. Now, the policy, I mean, these are the 8 things there are taken out of the list of 28. The policy to deliver this is actually not that new in a way. It builds on a fairly well-established social democratic agenda, intervention in the economy to ensure good jobs and to ensure minimum levels of income for people. And it might involve this might involve an industrial strategy, public sector employment practices, effective trade unionism, a decent welfare system if you can afford it, but is linked to flexible employment, and crucially, good governance, because all these things, particularly industrial strategy, only work if you can trust the government to actually deliver it. And the consensus now is that this is best done at city and regional level rather than at national level for a whole range of different reasons. So, the overarching point there is that a lot of good stuff is going on in that field, and it's one to watch, and that will have a very important impact on well-being. Go on to the next one. So to sum up, there's a lot going on, even if it's not always called well-being policy. It might be about, some of these programs are very explicitly about well-being that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, but stuff about planning, stuff about economic policy, it's often not talked about in these terms. So there's a lot going on. There's also work going on the tools that allow us to stitch all this together, and if you like, take these different recipes and put them into a recipe book that will actually be all the more effective for being stitched together. Consider the different trade-offs. So one thing I think we can do now, and we've reached the point at which it's the right time, is to review the policies that are achieving these different ingredients, even if they're not called well-being policies, and bring those together and start to create a recipe book. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for that presentation. The truth of the matter is that this is a great recipe. It was greatly presented. Thank you very much for that. As a matter of fact, he was shorted 5 minutes, and despite that, he has to be complimented twice because he was in full compliance with the time. Next, we have José de Jesús García Vega. He's head professor at the Department of Economics at the University of Monterrey, and he's also head of the Center for Studies on Well-Being. He's focused on the quality of life and the subjective well-being in Mexico. He's a fellow of the International Society of Quality of Life Studies and also a fellow of the Communities Consortium. He's part of the 100 scientists that took part on the World Book on Happiness. So, José de Jesús, please. Thank you very much. And after 40 speakers, we now have a pro and a con. The pro is that we can move faster because many things have already been said, so we can say that has already been mentioned and so forth. And there were many aspects that we might have as interesting facts in our presentation, but it has already been mentioned, so that's a pro. And I will steal something from my friends from other countries because I say good afternoon in English, and those are the only two words that I speak in English. So I will next continue in Spanish. Next, I would like to steal from Charles the following, and that is the recipe. I would like to steal from him all the recipe ingredients. For example, the list of ingredients that he showed, being a good cook, having good measurements when adding the ingredients, and the method, the cooking method. So in trying to work on an analogy here, if we were to have one element, only one element, we could have a good recipe, and we will have a good cook. So the cook will be in charge of selecting and sorting out the ingredients, measuring up and mixing everything correctly and preparing everything else. So who is this cook so that well-being can be transferred into the communities. I take that from Robert. Robert said this in the afternoon, because we will always have indicators, methodologies, we will always have a lot of actions, but if we don't have people's participation, it will be very hard to actually switch or change anything at all. So having a good cook and then having the participation of people. Why do we talk about subjective well-being? Well, this was information that was given before, so now I feel offended, but in any case, I will try to, rethink the way I present information. Anyhow, we need to be very cautious when talking about subjective well-being and happiness. We as Mexicans are always happy. Latin Americans, from a general perspective, are happy all the time, and we are proud to be happy. We want to be happy. So subjective well-being and happiness are elements we should put on the table for further discussion. It's not an idle discussion. It's not a superficial or a shallow type of discussion. Happiness is so relevant that it can give us benefits in the long term. As a matter of fact, there was a manifestation yesterday. There was a group of people that protested, but we have to understand that as well. We have to have happy children. We have to have a happy society so that we don't have corruption in the future. We can rest assured that we will be happier. We have to respect individuality. If you don't want to be happy, well, so be it. That's your choice. We need to respect that as well. However, what Leo Bortman said, and I copy from him, the idea is that we need to call for action. Happiness will not land on our field. Simple as that. No, we need to work towards our goal. And the state of well-being has to be worked on. I would like to start by saying something very simple by somebody that created something that is not that simple. Bill Gates. In the year 2013, he wrote a letter, and he talked about how amazing it is that we can move forward with a clear goal in mind if we have metrics in place, and we can foster so that the progress can be achieved. So we are talking about a clear goal, and then following on that, monitoring and doing proper follow-up. But this is precisely what we are talking about. It sounds as a logic line of ideas, but it's so hard to actually implement it and do it correctly. And it's even harder to believe that people carry out this type of process. For example, within the company or in a family or on a national level. We have Joseph Stiglitz that has promoted the comprehensive or integral well-being that mentions the fact that indicators, in addition to tell us how we are doing, they are the guideline. So they are so relevant, and the truth of the matter is that those like myself that have been studying this for so long understand how important metrics are and how the well-being can be measured, how we can understand it. And we are so pleased to have Mexico, England, and many other countries that have within their official metrics the integrated or integral well-being. That, of course, includes the subjective well-being. I will not go on detail when we talk about GDP. We understand now that GDP alone is not sufficient. We have to include other elements, so I'll skip this slide. So, if we take this statement by Bill Gates in the year 2013, we would have to underscore three aspects. Firstly, we need to have a clear goal. Afterwards, we have to measure what was performed or carried out, and then we have to foster or promote even further the progress of the goals. What does it mean when Bill Gates says that we have to have a clear goal in mind? You might agree with me, maybe you don't, but many years ago the utilitarians said that the government should create the greater well-being for the greater number of people. Is there anybody that doesn't agree with this statement? I really like it. I really like it. Now, let's talk about government's goals. What should the government's goals be? And the community's goals? Well, progress, development, well-being, happiness, quality of life. Now, here's the thing. We know, or do we know, or furthermore, do governments know what these goals are? What do they imply? Who defined this type of goals? Well, these are very good questions. We need to measure everything that has been done. We need indicators. Indicators are so important. Every time I talk about indicators, I want to tell you that whenever you want to lose some weight, what do you do in the morning? Or at least that's what I do, because my wife already told me to go on a diet. Well, I go to the scale and I measure up, or I weigh my body weight, and I measure an important issue here. I need a reflection of what is happening. So if governments are interested in the well-being of people, they need to measure how people are doing. If you don't measure something, well, you cannot improve it. This has been said and expressed constantly. And many people say that once you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail or a bolt. Well, a nail. And if you have a chain, you want to chain everything. So I hope that I'm not hurting anybody with these concepts, but after the year 2009, after the Stiglitz report, we had already worked on measurements for quality of life. And we were invited to go to Los Pinos, which is the presidential house in Mexico City. And I was telling the people there, I was asking them what the social policy was. And they say, well, to live better. And I asked, how do you live better? How do you measure up whether or not we are living better? And after 3 years in the government, do they know if we are doing better? There's no subjective measure whatsoever. And somebody said, what do you mean? What do you mean we don't have a measure? Well, we have the index, consumer reliability index. And I was never invited again because of the questions I asked. Never again invited to the presidential house because I pointed out the fact that they don't have the proper metrics. Now we have Mikalos and his paradise. We can imagine that there's two dimensions. On the one hand, we have life conditions, material conditions, that is, and on the other hand, we have the satisfaction or perception. If we have low conditions and we are upset or angry, that would be the hell. We are living in hell. If we are in good condition, overall good condition, that would be the real paradise. Mikalos calls it that way. Then Mikalos continues to say that if we have good conditions, but we are not okay, we are not doing well, that will be the hell of the silly ones. And Stiglitz said in one of the meetings I attended, and I had the opportunity to listen to him, he said that President Sarkozy said that once. He said that the indicators, the macroeconomic indicators were excellent, but people were not happy, and people are outside in riots and complaining all the time. So we can provide people with many things, but maybe that's not what they need. So we need to measure the subjective well-being. And then we have a quadrant, the last quadrant, that talks about the paradise of the silly ones. Few objective conditions and everybody happy. So we can find many, many, many people in this square. It's the paradise of the silly ones. I was having a conversation once with people that are part of the state university. This person is part of the state university here in Guadalajara, and he said that we have many fool people, many silly ones, because many people believe they are in paradise. What is the real paradise? The block, the lower right block? Well, it's quality of life. The real paradise talks about that, quality of life. We have talked about material issues. We talked about incomes. We are having a combination, and when that combination is attained, we can have the real paradise. Now, this model, which is similar to an example that was shown in Jacksonville's model, and this is communities that measure quality of life, and for some time now, some even started 30 years ago. So firstly, we need a vision, then knowledge. Of course, we need a plan, action, results or measuring, and an evaluation again. And then we go again. This is a loop. It's a cycle. It never ends. This is the way we can move forward towards our goal. We need to have confidence or trust amongst the stakeholders. In this case, we're talking about the government, the citizen, all the citizens, and we need taxes to be paid, and we need citizens to agree to pay these taxes and never cause problems. That's hard. And in return, we have the government that should provide with proper conditions so that the hopes and dreams of the citizens can flourish. The city will not provide us with the happiness per se, but it will and should create proper conditions so that we can, in return, be happy and flourish. So this is a commitment, this is a contract, if you will, between the city and the citizens, so that with that contract in mind, we can be happy or attempt to be happy. I would like to talk about a quality of life index. We developed this in 2008. This is part of the social center and a public opinion center, part of the University of Monterrey, and we even issued a book, and these are the indicators with the corresponding dimensions. This is a consensus, or part of the consensus. We have Joaquin de Palomar and Mariano Rojas, who are present here today, assisted us back then and helped us define what an integrated quality of life format is. 2008, that is. And 2 years afterwards, we had the next reports. And maybe they copied from us some of these aspects, but in any case, this takes us back to 2008. This is what we did. We worked on the book, but before that, we worked on a measure model and monitoring of quality of life. And as Charles would say, we have the ingredients. Now let's move on to the method, and let's work on a consensus, public information, so that people can see the results, criticize them, and tell us what's needed. Then the Ministry of Planning was changed from his role, and we couldn't continue with this. Then we were asked to go to San Pedro Garza Garcia, which is a municipality in Monterrey. We once again checked the quality of life, and we got together with the city council and other committees, and this was pretty interesting. We understood, because of what they said, that they needed more information. We did publish information. There was severe criticism on the part of the media. Of course, the media looks for different stuff. But anyway, what we wanted was to invite the society, the citizenship, so that they could be part of the dominions and the measures, so the quality of life could be better and more accurately measured. Now, when it comes to municipalities or city councils, city counties, it's very complicated because the terms last 3 years. Anyway, we incorporate this on the National Development Plan, and there's still much to do. The problem is that programs are somehow interrupted. So San Pedro, this county or municipality, asked for the family well-being. So another realm or dominion should be added. So they said. And turns out that a quality of life index, or measuring quality of life, is important. Jacksonville doesn't have this, only 100 metrics, give or take. We proposed an index. We believe that by having an index, we can break it down in dominions or indicators. We can also work in comparisons, and I will share that later on. Let's understand what the reason for an index is. It's like the inflation rate or inflation index. How can you have a subjective and an objective factor on the same page? Well, it's like comparing apples to pears. Well, if you check an inflation rate, it checks apples and pears. So an inflation rate can even help us understand salaries and wages. So we didn't find this to be a problem. We just consolidated the information. We can break down this information on metrics, dominions, indicators, and then by demographics. And we can work on comparisons. We can focus our attention to results and what public policies are required based on the findings, of course. This is based on social classes or socio-economical ranking, and it turns out to be pretty surprising, but the highest ranking in social safety is the lowest group of the society. They have less to lose, or we don't know why that was the answer, but it was contradictory. Now, when people say that size matters, well, we have to say that here the objective matters. What do we want to measure? What do we want to improve? We work on a regression analysis, a very simple one. We didn't make it complex, but we wanted to identify which elements coincide on happiness. We have health, quality of public services, the easy access or transportation throughout the city, recreational and sports spaces, or spaces for leisure have a greater impact on happiness. Now, a general question in San Pedro Garza Garcia County would go to the following variables. We have services, health services, and then the income. What can you buy with the income you currently have, and other factors. Another question had to do with the quality of life, overall standard. How likely is it for you to be in this city the rest of your life? And from 1 to 10, people answered that public servers, in this case public servers or public officials, and their efficiency came first, and other factors as well. I am right on time, right? Yes, I am right on time. Well, I am about to finish with final comments. So, what's left? What's left to do? Well, we need indicators. We need to measure. We need to measure and monitor. We have had experiences in the past, measuring experiences that are interesting. We can compare demographics, but if we don't have a measurement sequence or proper monitoring in place over time, it will be very hard to know whether we are progressing or not, and if public policies are working or not can be also analyzed from that perspective. We also need to know what the objective is, and I insist that if the community and the citizens are involved with the process, they can in turn define what their own definition for well-being is, what elements they are interested in. And I don't believe that there's one single community that says that it doesn't want to be happy. They always want to reach out for higher quality of life standards. But they should tell us what they need. And then we can put together experts so that the experts can analyze what's happening, what they are telling. Now, subjective aspects cannot be told by the experts, and objective aspects cannot, objective is for governors, and subjective is for people. What can we measure? Well, the quality of life and other aspects. Now, the National Bureau for Statistics and Geography is excellent. Their task is excellent and superb because of the scope and breadth they have. We need to understand changes. If the INEGI tells us, this National Bureau tells us that we are happy, well, we won't understand what they are talking about. We need to touch down on the communities. We need to lower that information or that type of information to the community level so that they from within can change, can actually get to that happiness level. So after the measurements are in place, the people, the community, can take on reviewing whether or not the public policies are focused on the metrics. And these people will gratify or punish those public servants that have as the major role, apparently, to increase our level of life. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jose de Jesus, and thank you for your punctuality when presenting your theme. Next, we have Olegario Sáenz Batalla. He's an economist and coordinator of the Planning Committee and Economics. He has taken part on this work since 2004. He has also been part of research and diagnostics on the Costa Rican national reality, especially when it comes to relative indicators for development in a general perspective, and more recently in the children and in the young generations. Olegario Sáenz Batalla, please. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to firstly thank the authorities of and officials of the state of Jalisco for this cordial invitation. This is a beautiful state, and the country as a whole is beautiful as well. Secondly, and please, the slides. I will be somehow against what has happened so far. I will speak about the way we measure, as was previously said. So I understand what Jose de Jesus said. I don't want to be heretic here, but I will be somehow radical. Measurement is important. Measuring is basic, but for public policies, it's important to have an idea, a general idea, but also a local idea as to what is happening. So we have the well-being on the one hand, which is objective, and the subjective one. So we have a statement on Forbes magazine that talks about or refers to a survey by a scholar, and it included many students measuring up subjective well-being. Costa Rica was ranked number 1. Want to be happy? Move to Costa Rica. This is what the slide says. So that's what Juliana Brio said, and it's not only for soccer, because we really like football, soccer there. So I will try to include 3 basic concepts. Of course, we need the general considerations when creating or analyzing the best indicators. Then we will have a case of study, a case that we developed locally, and that is the local social index. And another one that is very recent is the IBINA, which is an acronym for the Children and Adolescent Well-being Index, INIBA. The stages that have to do with the formulation and index development are basically 3. We need to understand or ask ourselves why we need the index, what it will measure, what it will help me with. So that would be the conceptualization. However, with conceptualization alone, I cannot work. I need to have relevant and pertinent data so that I can understand the overall process. And that will be vital in light of the availability of data. And well, okay, I have the concept, I have the information or data, and now I need to calculate and validate. Because this morning, one of the this morning it was mentioned very clearly that validation is basic for proper understanding. As to social development indexes, we have a law. No, I will skip one slide, please. The planning law, national law, it's law 5525 that sets forward the mandate so that there's updated and prospective diagnosis regarding the national reality or the national status. In order to do so, the Ministry of Planning or Secretariat of Planning has to have in place a number of standards, and there's the National Development Plan that is part of this. As a matter of fact, this has played an important role when it comes to budgetary allocation from a national perspective to localities. So we have 81 departments, or in this case, sections or regions, and it will depend on the level of development to allocate the budget or resources. There's another piece of legislation that indicates that it's important to always have or include information so that we can better distribute resources for maintenance and construction of the national roadways or highways. Likewise, it's important to have a tool that can further foster or promote human resources and the human resources from the teacher's perspective. This is in the more depressed area. For an incentive, for example, an incentive can be given to these people, and the incentive will be based on development. So in Costa Rica, we have an incentive for all the teachers that work in less development areas or less developed areas, and we don't do anything with a metric or an index if there is no political support or government support. We have to be certain. We have to be certain about the establishment of an index. Then proper follow-up and political support will be mandated. It's a condition that has to be given and always in parallel to the calculation. So the academic exercise of working on an index is very simple. It's not that complex. But why do we need an index? Well, that's fundamental. We need to answer to that in a proper way so that we understand that there's no need in written information.
So, on what refers to concepts, how are we understanding the previous slide, please? How do we understand social development? For us, social development is the process that aims to improve the quality of life of the citizenship through more egalitarian society that is inclusive, that will guarantee increasing well-being level among the different social groups and geographical areas within a frame of respect where human rights are fostered. So how are we going to limit this based on statistical data? So we start from defining or from taking the definitions that ASEAN provides. For social development or human development, we need to widen the options that people have in terms of improving their human capacities. That is to say, diversity, the diverse things that people can do or become in life. This is a concept that relates to freedom. What in my freedom as a user of my freedom can do and not do. So this index approaches development starting from 4 dimensions. Economic dimension that stresses out the right that all persons have to have dignified householding, health, the right to live a long and healthy life, education, the right to be able to receive or have access to quality education, and finally citizenship participation. This is another sphere that has been included in subjective well-being analysis in previous presentations here. So the ultimate goal of using this index is going to be implementing policies that will close gaps, and this is the ultimate goal. Well, and as it has been already exemplified, this index we calculate based on these 4 dimensions, and we use it to determine what areas are more or less developed relatively. So this will serve as a support to politicians and to current administrations to allocate both human and financial resources. Another aspect that outstands at the national current development program that was just presented the last 17, it is that incorporate public policies specifically created based on this index. We're not talking about an index that gets calculated and then remains written somewhere on some paper. No, what we have decided is already going to work, or my constitution now is going to be based on what social development data proves. And as I said earlier, this serves as a tool to allocate public resources to those geographical areas with less development. So, this index has a very special feature. It is appropriate to remark. We are saying that it started being computed through a census that was started in 1963 that was repeated in 1984, and later on the statistical data was used at a management level in order to implement this. And then as management or government statistics, we started to make calculus in 1999, and this is when institutions gathered content on annual statistics for indicators that were necessary for this social index. So we didn't stop by getting the census information. We used the same information for the social index according to yearly availability of this data for the government and administration. This is the census is done on a 6 years basis, and we have a special index for each dimension: economic, educational, where the district with larger levels will be scored 100, and the least or the smallest is going to be scored 0, and then we take an average out of this addition. And the third step is the validation of social development index. We made this time we made it by using the basic unsatisfied basic needs statistics according to the index and the data that this proved to be. It was very high at a district level. It was minus 0.87. At the state or a province level, it was 0.87. And in terms of reliability, we use compact information that indicated there's a very high correlation that proves to have this compatibility that we can say is excellent. This is a Costa Rican map, and this is when we observe the provinces, the districts, I'm sorry. It is 417 districts. However, you can see the asymmetry amongst them. And one of the main important aspects that I want to remark here is that well-being or development, we cannot see it as a whole at the national level. We need to emphasize the differences at specific regions, and the black rectangle by central Costa Rica, this is the metropolitan area, the large metropolitan area. We have almost 55% of Costa Ricans living here, and it is only 2.1% territory. So this is a very reduced area geographically, but it groups a large amount of population. And development levels are relatively or comparatively smaller by the borders: North, South, and Caribbean. And these three, please stop there. These three, the areas that are marked in black, we can see these are another Costa Rica, a very different Costa Rica. This is something we can assess as another Costa Rica, very different from the metropolitan area by the north, Nicaragua, by the South Panama, and by the Caribbean. Okay, so let's stop there. However, if we go to the Pacific region, we are going to find Nicoya region and the what we call Central Pacific area. They are different as well. They are different. Here we have, over here we find this green, both light and dark, and these are the 4th and 5th levels of our social index. So as we get away from central Costa Rica, the local development level diminishes. However, if we get away to the east, we're going to have relatively better conditions. And here we are able to see by specific regions the same data. So this in a number reference, these are the data we will obtain if we perform statistical calculation. We have the central region with maximum and minimum levels for social development index, but an average is 67. It is a very, very good amount for Choroteca and Central Pacific region that are very similar one to the other, that correlate to the east of the country, and finally north border, south border, and the Caribbean region. These three regions are totally different, are a world apart. So 60% of the districts we can collocate in quintiles with most favorable development. 2.1%, as I said, of the territory of the country relate to this. This is basically by the center. This map reflects the a persistent heterogeneity in the development of this country. Those districts with the lowest values are located by the borders north and south, and they prove differences in the values we have reached at the different districts when they are more or they are further away from the capital. And of course, the best development we have it in the metropolitan area as well as some other areas by northeast. And the social development index and the national plan for development. Now, these are policies that have been brought down to earth, and they consolidate the social development index. So for childhood well-being and adolescence, this is something that has been calculated from newly borns. This is something we calculated in 2013. And why did we do this? That's because UNICEF needed support for quantifying the levels of life of the childhood and teenagers in Costa Rica, and they required us this, so we were happy to do this, but they said, let's not only do it at your states or provinces level, but at district level. And we used data from the census of 2011 in order to conceptualize what well-being is. And we can continue. So from here we can have a different approach. Well-being of children encompass the quality of life from a wide perspective. It relates to economic conditions, to relations among peers, which is basic, political rights and opportunities for development. This is a concept we started defining in order to be able to calculate the well-being index for both children and teenagers. And Mrs. Lugo was telling us about multidimensionality in these indexes. So we worked with 35 indicators at the census level and 3 dimensions: material conditions, as we have remarked several times, in order to mention subjective well-being, education processes. If we don't get education, we cannot improve well-being either subjectively or objectively, and the household environment as well as income level. So that's the chart. And another one, we also approached according to groups of population. We not only consider from 0 to 17 years, but we divided this into 3 groups: the toddlers, children, and adolescents. So we have 3 scopes for a specific population amongst the different groups of age. And for validation, we have several criteria employed about or in regards to unsatisfied basic needs. This was a core criterion. Some experts were brought to work on this, as well as the reliability index. This is IBINA for 2013 for age from age 0 to 17 years, and this is what we have observed for social development in accordance to social development index. And the largest well-being indexes we concentrate by the great metropolitan area, while in the rest of the country we find very specific areas for north, west, and west. And this has led people to move to more urban areas by central Costa Rica. The middle term objective for this index is relying on perspectives about well-being of children and adolescents. However, what is the desideratum that would be relying on a panel on an overview of childhood in Costa Rica in 2013 in order to be able, based on statistical data, to rely on a follow-up that is going to be done more often, so we can contribute to these most vulnerable groups of age, children and adolescents. And from myself, with all my affection, I truly wish, as we say in my country, to enjoy pure life. Thank you. Thank you, Olegario. Now we're going to have a double presentation, and we have this duet made by Maripaz Herrera Dominguez and Cristina. They are the founders of I Am an Entrepreneur, Woman Entrepreneur. They have their agency for the social and economic transformation. They work on developing education models for the entrepreneurship of families and small businesses. They are co-authors on entrepreneurship in Puebla, Oaxaca, and Jalisco. So now I will give you a small resume about each of them. Maripaz Herrera Dominguez, she's a public accountant with a master's degree in business management, industrial business management by Universidad Iberoamericana. She has studied finance, projects evaluation, gender, positive psychology, and also collaboration to small and medium-sized companies, incubation, innovation, developing thinking strategies, leadership, corporate governance, talent development. She has been certified by different organizations and universities, both national and international. She's a coach, a consultant, and trainer on business topics for small and medium-sized companies, personal finances, advice to micro companies and community banks. While Cristina Reynoso Gonzalez, she has a major degree in marketing from the Panamericana University, from ITESO, which is one of the universities in Guadalajara, with a specialization on markets, business simulators, training, foreign trade, and strategic planning. She has participated as an instructor and certified trainer for the implementation of programs at the 3 levels of government. She is an advisor for business planning, integration of markets, design of products, internationalization. And she has participated at different, as consultant to different companies, both at public and private level. So, Maripaz and Ana Cristina, please. Thank you. I want to thank all the people who invited us, and we are going to divide this presentation, Maripaz and I, and we are going to share with you the results we have been witnessing for the past 3 years that relate applying subjective well-being to entrepreneurship. We are very happy, very fortunate to have developed the first model for entrepreneurship from the science of subjective well-being. So to tell you a little about this, the background of this overview in Mexico, both Maripaz and I have more than 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship topics. Maripaz has worked in the area of Tlaxcala, Puebla, Hidalgo, and myself, I am based here in Jalisco, and I have worked in northern Mexico, Coahuila and Durango mostly. 3 years ago, I was fortunate to move to Puebla City, and this is where Maripaz and I got together, and we started with this enterprise. I am very happy that we have many academicians and doctors. We are not academicians, but we are people who live through experience. So through this entrepreneurship model, we endeavored to see what was happening in this, and we got to see figures and something that relates to occupation and unemployment in our country, and from the actively economically active people, from this 53 million of in this age, we have to think that almost 40% 60% of almost 2 million of people of this group are totally unemployed, and 40% women, 60% are men. Informality, unemployment also concerns us in the states of the north, Chihuahua, Tamaulipas, Coahuila. We see unemployment that almost reaches 6%, and informality on the other side, here by the southern states at Guerrero, Oaxaca, Chiapas, they reach almost 80% unemployment. So these are unemployment figures, informality, and informal employment. This is something that are truly worrisome. Now, about companies that get to be established, Margarita was so much scared. Almost 95% of companies are either micro or small. These companies that generate 5.4 employments. These family companies have great challenges, and one refers to aligning the interests of the family to the objectives of the business. If this was not a big enough problem, I think that these companies that surpass all these and pass to the next stage, only 30% out of them get to a second generation. These family companies only get to the second generation. Out of this 22% that gets to a second stage, only 10% will go to a fourth generation. So this is our current reality. So let's move to the next. And in this reality about entrepreneurship in Mexico, is this working? Okay. So you feel safe when you click on this, and it's wonderful. So how does people make entrepreneurship? I supported FOJAL here, which is a fund that works through the government of this state. And I remember people got to us and said, "Oh, do I get a loan here?" They told me they loan here. They make loans here, and we said, "Yes, we have loans here." And they said, "I come for my money. I want to become an entrepreneur. What kind of business? I don't know. What would you recommend?" So this is not the way we can do it. Generating new entrepreneurs or business developers in Mexico, people, they first ask for money. They say, "I don't know," or "I can't," and they have no hope. "Please, I want somebody to rescue me," and they are totally unmotivated. So in front of this, we found public policies at federal, state, and municipal level that are totally disarticulated. What does this mean? That sometimes we had red flags, green flags, yellow flags, and they would generate different intents to try to support entrepreneurship. They were totally unarticulated, with no follow-up, not being measured. They were very expensive. So now in this new race for supporting entrepreneurship, we had to pass from this informal and unemployed person that had the idea to become a business person to make him become an entrepreneur with a good project for a company that would become successful, feasible from the economic standpoint, and articulated. So what is being done now in Mexico based on this reality? Are we generating this first model of entrepreneurship? In Mexico, we are doing it through subjective well-being. And this is nothing more than accompanying each participant, each of the persons that get to us to request for something, so we can help them generating their own economic and emotional wealth. So through this entrepreneurship model, we need each of us to have a subjective well-being topic at the same level. So it could be through your best potential, through the potentialization of the best you can have. You can generate your well-being, and this is your affective, your labor, your family relations, and this is something that will be translated into a common good, and this will impact not only economically your person, but also in terms of happiness, not only your best possible I or your best possible self, but this will impact also your community. So now we are going to get to see this video in order to see how entrepreneurs experience this first pilot program in Puebla. So what we will present to you is an excellent opportunity for ladies in Puebla so they can think of their future. They are women who are eager to improve not only economically but emotionally. Maite, she's one of the 40 women in Puebla who took this course that is called Generate Your Own Wealth at economical and emotional level. In 4 months, she was able to change her life, and she started a business that is doing very well now. I went for the emotional because I was feeling insecure, I had low self-esteem, I was a little depressed, and this is how I decided to get into this diploma course. But it has surpassed my expectations, because it is not only that they have included emotional aspects but also financial and economic. I have discovered that I really enjoy producing a soap, and in this process of doing this that serves to take care of human beings, I had the idea to make this handcraft 100% natural organic soap, and she has opened her doors, the doors of the hotels, and now she's trying to get to Europe. Now we're trying to get into the market of boutique hotels and also to sell this at individual levels, and we hope in the future we can make our product international. And this is a diploma course that is ruled by a unique model based on human and business development. The objective is to achieve both economic and emotional balance to help and support them attaining their goals. Some people start a business thinking what could bring them money, but what we do through this methodology is that women identify what their talents are, what their strengths, virtues are, what is that they master, and what they are passionate about. And from there, they can start a business. So they have concepts as optimism, the capacity to overcome adversity, forgiveness, sense of life, spirituality, way of life, and wealth generation. We have seen that for women, when we want to start a business, we get lost in, oh, he left, he abandoned me, my child is sick, and we start thinking about what we don't have. But this model starts on what we have. You lose path. You think you don't have anything. You think you don't have what you need to move on. And it is not that you don't have it. It is only that you lost your way. So for me, this is what I enjoyed most about this diploma course. And through the change of the in life of these women, there were an increase of 40% in their income. This diploma course will start again next Monday. If you want further information, you can call this number, or you can go to this office. And my name is Montserrat. So this was a pilot program 2 years ago in Puebla, but nowadays, and we get back please to my PowerPoint presentation. So this was a pilot program that was only for women, but today we have it for men and women. There was a lady who brought her son and then her husband, and then from being only for women, now it has become for family companies, and it has brought children, sisters, and from being an entrepreneur, now we have a much more complete model. So what we have done is that we instruct agents of transformation, and through a methodology that is totally experiential, totally ludic, we have a program of 96 hours of present courses and other 32 hours of activities at home that people through online tools learn by doing through practical cases at each of our sessions. For human development, through positive psychology, through business development, we start using meditation techniques for mindfulness that refers to getting concentrated on our breath. And also that provide us with a whole systems, a whole model of learning that today is aimed for not only to women but for everybody who is willing and eager to become entrepreneurs and who are older than 18 years.
Good afternoon. The truth of the matter is that Cristina and I, this evening, are truly thankful for this invitation, and we also like to thank the mentor, our guide, our guru, Margarita Tarragona, and obviously Gerardo Leiva, who has been part of this effort, as well as Mariano Rojas and all those that have made this project possible. We are very emotional about this. Now, this is the guideline we have developed with somewhere around 600 pages, and this is a roadmap. The roadmap for the entrepreneur. I would like to work on an exercise with all of you. It's a very brief type of exercise. Let's suppose that this afternoon, this evening, you are looking for a job. You're actually trying to get a job. Maybe you are 25 years old, 30, 40, or you are about to retire, or maybe you are a female head of your house or a single mom, and you have been trying to find an opportunity. You have been looking for a job for a while now. Now, for many years, we have noticed that people, when get to us, are tired. They are worn out. They do not try to find, they are not able to find the effort or the energy, I should say, to start a job. So this is the experience we have noticed. And when working on a business plan, well, an economic viability is not solved with one type of plan. So we have neurosciences in place. We have experiences that we now have in the business world, and some of the factors we have put together so that we can articulate in a natural way what we now work on. Now, I need the pointer. I need the pointer. Somebody needs to be in control. So, for the time being, I will have the control now. So this is a roadmap I am referring to. It's a 96-hour program and a 4-month process. And as Sonia Lobowinski said, in a 3-month period, we can switch, we can turn around mindsets, we can turn around habits so that you can become a better person, better than you were before, even better. Now, we start with a dream. We have to picture a world ahead of us, maybe 3, 5, 10 years ahead of us. How do we picture our life in that time frame? At the end of this roadmap or pathway, we have talents, happiness, positive emotions. We have Mr. Selling, Mr. Lewinsky, and other authors that are included here, Mr. Mihail with Human Flourishing, Caroline Miller, and many authors that work on these practical sessions during which we touch down on positive psychology from an experiential perspective. So my family, well, first and foremost myself, and then my family, and then my colleagues. Let's go back. Please don't pass the slides yet. Now, we have the official route for entrepreneurship. So, firstly, you identify yourself with an idea, a market idea. So, this is the first momentum. This is the first session with entrepreneurs and or potential entrepreneurs that might or might not have a business yet. And they start with finances, personal finances. Let's work on budgets. Let's work on your and spending, as we call it, and also compatibility. For example, how compatible are you with your partner, with your spouse? You have a financial project or you have a simulated financial project. So I understand that I am doing well time-wise, and don't worry, I will comply with my time. We will connect all the topics. I will put them together, and when it comes to entrepreneurship, we have talents, we have strengths, and experiences that people have, experiences that they have gained over the years. We now know that people have entrepreneurship, always asking, or they talk an enterprise asking the first incorrect question: how much money will this give me? That's not the first step. That should not be the first step. The first step should always be what my passion is. For example, you like to work on a product, maybe manufacture something, maybe dance, maybe share. I don't know, different perspectives. Now this is a human development and then the business development, and I will skip the slides. We were fortunate enough to experience this model from the year 2012 to 2014. Of course, there's an impact. And the evaluation and metrics. This is the first public policy for business. We always need to measure the impact. And the INEGI, as the Bureau of Statistics issues this information. Well, it measures this up and then it issues the information. And also we have the industry property rights and some other aspects that are well covered by all these entities on the slide. Now, the results: 130 entrepreneurs, out of which 60% are women and 40% men. We want to truly complement the state of Jalisco, which through FOJAL, there has been a very successful program in place for entrepreneurs. And in March, or by March, we will have finished these 500 first entrepreneurs. So for all those of you that are part of the financial world, you might be aware of the fact that this type of program goes before any type of credit, so that portfolio or lost portfolios, past due portfolios are not in the picture, and that is bad debt. Now we're talking about the marital status, 40 and 60, single and married respectively, and then scholar levels or educational levels. We have a very high level at the career level, corresponding to the states of Puebla and Jalisco, given that we are talking about states and cities that have great offer when it comes to universities. Next, we have health indicators. You can now know how we have meditation habits increased, and then anguish being or anxiety being diminished. So these health indicators cover up the overall picture. And then we have business and economy indicators. This reports whether people feel better trained or more skilled. Also, there's investment identification. So at the end of the process, they perfectly knew what they will be using the credit for or the project. Well, most of them, 80% of the people knew what type of business they will embark upon. And then we have the economic overall satisfaction. Very interesting data. We compare the before and after here, and in other slides we also compare men and women. We don't have time now, but it's interesting to see what makes us happy as women or as men from a business perspective. Now we have life increased, effective life 46%, the family life 63%. This is the before and after, I should add. And then happy life and current satisfaction because of the business from 0 to 80% when comparing the before and the after. So I have some words we have registered throughout the process so that we can now know how people feel or how they were feeling throughout the process. It's interesting to always notice what this means from a qualitative perspective and how people register themselves in their mood, their self-esteem, their security, and the perception regarding the customers and clients. We are talking about hope, optimism, and resilience, amongst others. So all these topics, of course, have to do with this roadmap ahead of them. And in a country such as ours, and this was commented on this morning, we have bureaucracy and we have the market, which is ferocious. We, entrepreneurs, need to develop certain skills, certain competencies, and In order to conclude, we have the impact. This is the first degree in Mexico that has an impact measurement through the BIARE and the INEGI. These are two tools. Well, the first one is a tool. The second one is the Bureau of Statistics. And then throughout this 4-month period, 96 hours, there's a self-knowing or self-knowledge process, allowing me to know me better, have a better confidence and rely on myself. I have to understand my well-being status, my family, my surrounding. So family relationships are so important. Now we know that. So through these projects and models, we will rescue this, we will recover this. And you might not believe this, but people start to realize that they can reconcile with others. And also they understand that there's toxic relationships. They start to recover what they lost in terms of the relationship with their children, with their spouse, and so forth. Also economics and the perception is improved. We, of course, have character flaws that are corrected, and the mood is improved, and, well, overall benefits. Then we have the development of psychological strength. We can improve communication. Whenever we're talking about family enterprises, well, communication is relevant. Then we have financial culture and a platform that allows for confidence, trust. This is what we need. Strategic alliances and productive models. So this is the seed for social transformation and economic transformation as well. And the last slide. Who can be part of this? Economic development, social development, the Ministry of Education, which is very interested in this model. Also young people institutes or women institutes, maybe other countries. And during the past months, we have had contact with countries that are interested in this model. The next slide, please. I would stop talking now. This is the end of our participation, and on the slide, we're talking about other actors that can also take part. And stated universities, incubating agencies, as well as other stakeholders. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. Very well. With that, we conclude this visit to the kitchen of well-being. Charles talked about the recipe with the 28 ingredients, and he also talked about the ratios or proportions and the method. He mentioned an important factor, and we don't have to wait to have everything or all the ingredients on the table so that we can start cooking. We need to cook right off. We need to start. When it comes to well-being, we can see what we have and work with it. And the chef is an important or a key factor. The profile is good, but no names, and we need that type of chef, so please give us some names. Then Jose organized the kitchen, and as a matter of fact, there was a flow chart. That means that he comes from Monterrey. Everybody from Monterrey works on flow charts, and he had a prudent type of revolution. And he talked about knowledge first and then the plan. That is a revolution. We specialize on working on the plan without this, knowing what we are talking about, or before we know what we are embarking on. And then Charles also mentioned that it would be ideal to understand what type of guests we have, to consider what they want to eat. Then Olegario framed the kitchen within an institutional situation. And taking the word of Jose, he did give us the people that would sit down at the table to eat, not only to know what they want to eat, but what they need to eat. And that means that Charles' ingredients will be provided to these people. So Olegario took it all the way to the final guests. Then we have Maripaz and Ana Cristina, who are very glad consumers, and they work on a kitchen that is based on well-being with a proper dosage of subjective well-being. If we were to put this into practice in the state of Jalisco and taking into consideration the organization I head, Jalisco ¿Cómo vamos? So Jalisco, how are we doing? This is the name of my institution. I believe that in a ranking position based on last year's efforts, it would be work, personal safety, then personal health, and other factors that would be part of the diet that Jalisco needs. Thank you very much for your patience and your attention. I would like to thank the members of the panel as well for your generosity, and good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.